Another little bit of interesting perspective on this experience of the Metzora, the leper, and what it means to be kind of existing outside the camp, which is something I want us to think a little bit more about this morning. As I mentioned earlier, there are kind of multiple halachic categories of exclusion, and there are three that are commonly lumped together in the Mishnah and the Talmud. And these are in Hebrew, the Avel, the Menudeh, and the Metzora. Someone who is a mourner, one who is placed under a ban of excommunication, and our leper, for lack of a better English term, the subject of this morning's Parsha. And there's a Mishnah in the section entitled Midot, measurements, that talks, the whole section talks about the physical layout of the second temple. And it describes the experience of some of these people who are kind of excluded from the community and how they are excluded and included at the same time. And so the Mishnah recounts that all who entered the temple entered by the right and walked to the right and exited on the left side, save for those to whom something had happened, in kind of some generic language there. And those people entered to the left and walked to the left and exited on the right. And so if you imagine kind of the sea of people coming to the temple walking in one direction, and those whom we're categorizing as something happened to them, they're walking against that flow, right? They are a sea of people kind of, in a sea of people walking in one direction, these individuals are walking in the opposite direction. And the Mishnah goes on to explain that this was so that people would ask them specifically why they were walking the wrong way. And in hearing that something had befallen them, they would have the opportunity to offer words of comfort. And I think this Mishnah truly speaks to kind of how strange it is to be living in a state of otherness or separateness. And I think it acknowledges that whichever side of the equation we're on, we never quite know exactly how to behave. If something has happened to us or to one we love or to our family, do we acknowledge that? Or do we keep our head held high and pretend that nothing's happened? As a friend or a community member, do we offer our support and our sympathy? Or do we pretend everything's okay until we are asked directly to do otherwise? The Mishnah, and I think our history of Jewish practice, is pretty clear here. We try specifically to not let things fall under the rug, or we don't sweep things under the rug. By creating this convention of walking against the sea of people, all of the people who are whole, we create a two-way obligation, letting everyone know when we are hurting and offering whatever gestures and words we can to help heal that pain. The idea of the reciprocal obligations of grief and comfort is also one that is firmly rooted in our Parsha this morning. One of the more possibly disturbing verses we read this morning was chapter 13, verse 45. And I don't know if it stuck out to anybody when we actually read it, but I'm going to read it again in Hebrew and then in English. Metzora asher bo hanega bigada v'yufrumim v'rosho yefarua ve'al safam ye'ateh ve'tamei yikara. As for the person with a leprous infection, his clothes shall be rent, his head shall be left bare, and he shall cover his upper lip. And this is the part I want to focus on a little bit. And he shall call out, impure, impure. Certainly that last section, at least to me, seems like a little bit of overkill. When you already, this person's status is not a secret to start with. And we do already have these conventions of further solidifying that state of separateness, the ripping of the clothes, the head being left bare. Do we really need that individual to publicly cry out their own shame? The answer, according to the Talmud, is a little bit of a yes and a no. As I mentioned earlier, this impurity was a really serious condition in the ritual lives of the ancient Israelites, one that affected both the individual and the community surrounding them. And it was thought of as a transmittable condition. And so the Torah text and the Talmud text does see a need for the person afflicted with tzara'at to really actively call out a warning to their friends and neighbors. But this idea of the public declaration, and this gets back to Joel's question a couple minutes ago, was also according to the Talmud, was specifically to entice the community to pray on that individual's behalf. According to Rabbi Shai Hel, this is actually a very audacious interpretation by the rabbis of the Talmud. They cannot negate the biblical mandate of isolation of the leper, but they can transform his reality within the community. As Rabbi Held and others point out, we each need to be willing to participate in both sides, to ask for help when we need it, and to offer support and prayer, to recognize the humanity of others with all the empathy we can muster when those in our community need that support. And I've been thinking a lot about this in terms of our own kind of current status, as I think each and every one of us right now is in a little bit of a category of the other. For all the Torah that I've learned about temple and temple practices, most of which gets shrugged off as a relic of past times, I actually really like this metaphor of walking in a specific direction. I feel like for the past 15 months or however many months it's been, I think we've all been walking to the left together, right? Walking in this place of knowing and acknowledging that something is wrong, and that something is unusual and that something is off. And I think for the most part, we've been doing a really great job of actually both walking to the left and walking to the right, right? Like acknowledging that something is off within ourselves and within those we love, and also offering support and sympathy and empathy to everyone else around us. And so we've actually been walking in both directions at the same time. I think our next big challenge is really navigating what will feel like a turning tide, determining when and how we are comfortable as individuals and as a community to make that about face and walk to the right, and speaking honestly and openly and lovingly to everyone walking beside us, regardless in which way they are facing and which way they are walking. In reading the rituals of the Metzora, I was almost like sparked with a little bit of jealousy. There's something that is really clear cut in these rituals, right? Of kind of the priest being able to determine when it is over, the idea of being able to bring a sacrifice and know that this whole experience is behind you. And the idea that there's almost kind of an on and off switch, right? Like when it's done, you know it's done, you can offer the sacrifice and you can re-enter the camp. Unfortunately, I think for us, it's going to be a lot more messy and a lot more drawn out and a lot more touch and go. And my hope for all of us is that the strength we've developed in holding ourselves and holding up each other through this period of collective otherness will also help us navigate the waters of getting path to wholeness, of getting back to the path of wholeness and togetherness.